Sefa Calder put her blade through the dead man's eye and caught him before he fell, because in the buried city a body that dropped was a sound, and a sound was death. She lowered him to the broken floor the way you lower a sleeping child, slow, both arms, no clatter. Then she turned because he had not come alone. They never came alone. There were 4 more of them in the dark of the old hall, and they had heard the small wet work of the first one dying, and they were turning toward it now with that terrible patience the dead had, the patience of things that had nowhere else to be. 4, Sefa breathed. Close, blades only, nobody swings wide. Behind her she heard the others set their feet, Brel's weight shifting, Nim going light onto the balls of her boots, Call letting out the long, slow breath of a man who had done this more times than he wanted to remember. This was the part the people up in Hythe never understood. They thought fighting the dead was loud, swords and shouting and torches. It wasn't, not down here, not if you wanted to live through it. Down here, fighting the dead was the quietest thing in the world. You killed them the way you'd put out a candle with wet fingers, fast, close, and without a hiss. The first of the 4 came into the lantern's narrow light, and Sefa saw what it had been. A soldier, Arvin armor, 200 years gone to green and rot, the Empire's sun still just visible stamped on the breastplate. The face above it was leather pulled tight over bone. The eyes were the worst part, they always were. There was a kind of looking in them that was not seeing and was not nothing either. It reached for her without hurry. Sefa stepped inside the reach, took its wrist in her free hand, and drove her short blade up under the jaw into the brain, and held the body's whole weight on her arm and her blade as the looking went out of it, and let it down soft. No sound, good, 1 more candle out. The second came faster. The dead were not all the same, some shuffled. Some, the fresher-minded ones, the ones that still had some old engine running in them, came at you with intent, and this one came at Nim with its hands already up for her throat. Nim, Sefa started, too far to reach her. She did not have to reach her, Brel did. Brel caught the dead thing by the back of its rotted collar and yanked it off its feet, away from Nim, and Nim turned in the same instant and put her knife through its temple while it was still falling, and Brel took its weight as it dropped and laid it down without a knock. 3 of them now. Nim looked at Brel. Brel looked at Nim. Neither said anything because saying anything was a sound, but something passed between them that did not need a word, the thing that passes between people who have just kept each other alive. Sefa felt it too, watching them. That was the thing she would think about later when it mattered most. That down here, in the worst place in the world, her people kept reaching for each other in the dark. The last 2 came together, and that was the dangerous moment, because 2 at once meant somebody had to take one alone. Call took one alone. The old man stepped up past Sefa without being told, took the nearer dead thing's lunge on his crossed forearms, and went down under it on purpose, controlling the fall, riding it to the floor so the body landed on him instead of on the stone. Sefa heard the breath go out of him. She did not hear the body because Call's chest had caught it. He got his knife up between them and into its skull, and lay there a second under a 200-year-old corpse breathing hard, before he rolled it off himself with both hands, gently, gently, and let it settle. Sefa took the last one herself, wrist, jaw, brain down, the way her hands knew. Then there was nothing left standing in the hall but the 4 of them, and the lantern, and the long ringing quiet that was not really quiet at all, because the buried city was full of the dead, and the dead were always listening. Count, Sefa whispered. 5 down, none up, Call murmured, still on the floor. Nobody woke the house this time. That was the whole game down here. That was the only game. Hythe sat 30 feet above their heads, the fastest-growing city in the world, 20,000 people building shops and raising children in the ruins of something they had never bothered to understand. They did not know that the empire that had built this place had survived 100 years against the dead and then died in a single one. They did not know that when the Arvin fell, they fell all at once, the whole city in a season, and that everything they had owned and everyone they had been was still down here in the dark, in their houses, in their halls, waiting. Waiting was all the dead did, but there were a great many of them, and if you woke enough of them at once, no blade in the world was quiet enough to matter. 5 was nothing, 5 you could put out like candles. The whole city all at once was the thing that ended you. Garin Hale came down the broken stair behind them with the rest of the expedition and the second lantern, and he was smiling, which Sefa had learned to read as weather. Clean, Hale said, looking at the 5 laid down dead. He said it the way a man praises good work. You see that, you lot, that's how it's done, not a sound. Calder could walk through a nursery without waking the babies. We got lucky, Sefa said. It was 4 and a straggler, if it had been a room of them. It wasn't, Hale said. Count your luck on the way out, we're close. Sefa let it go, she always let it go. That was the job. She had been Garin Hale's second for 6 years, and in 6 years she had learned the shape of him the way you learn a coast you sail often. He was not a cruel man. He was something more complicated and more dangerous than cruel. He was a man who had decided, a long time ago, exactly what the work was worth, and who did the arithmetic out loud in front of you so you'd think you'd agreed to it. The Grey Expedition Society had chartered this descent to map, that was all. A new section of the Arvin Undercity had opened when a cistern collapsed under the east quarter, and the society wanted it charted, the halls, the hazards, the dead density, the safe lines drawn for the careful expeditions that would come after. Map it and come home, that was the charter. Sefa had read it. Every man and woman on the rope had signed it. They had passed the edge of the charter 2 hours ago. We're off the map, Hale, Call said. He said it low, but he said it. The society line stopped at the cistern hall. We've been past it half the afternoon. The society line, Hale said, was drawn by men who have never been down here on a chart of a place nobody had seen. We're the ones seeing it, we adjust. We adjust toward the treasury, Call said. The words sat in the dark. Sefa felt the whole expedition hear it, the treasury. They had all known it without saying it, known it since Hale had started pushing them east and down instead of charting the cistern hall and turning back. An empire that survived 100 years had 100 years of wealth, and an empire that fell in a single season had no time to spend it, hide it, or carry it away. It was all still here. The Arvin Reserve, sealed in the spine of a dead city, untouched for 200 years. Every relic hunter on the morning coast had dreamed of it. None had ever come back up to say they'd found it. Say your piece, Call, Hale said. Pleasant. That was the dangerous pleasant. My piece is we signed to map, Call said. We didn't sign to wake a city. The deeper we go, the thicker they get. You've all felt it. We're walking into the middle of the most dead in one place that any of us has ever. Sefa, Hale said, not looking away from Call. Tell him. And here was the thing Sefa would have to live with. She agreed with Call. She had agreed with Call for 2 hours. Every careful bone in her body was telling her the old man was right, that the dead were getting thicker, that they were past every line that kept people alive, that nothing down here was worth a city waking up. And she said, Call, we hold together. Hale's run 100 of these. You knew who you were following when you signed. If we start arguing in the dark, that's how somebody swings wide and that's how we all die. So we follow and we keep quiet and we go home rich. Hold the line. Call looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger in it, which was worse than anger. There was something closer to disappointment, the look of a man who had hoped, just this once, that the second would be the second to the crew instead of the second to the chair. Aye, Calder, Call said, hold the line. Sefa told herself she had done the right thing. Discipline kept people alive. A divided expedition died. She had said the words that held them together, and holding them together was her whole purpose, and that was loyalty, and loyalty was the job. She told herself that, and they went deeper, and she did not yet know that she was wrong about what loyalty was. The deeper they went, the more the dead stopped looking like people who had died and started looking like an army that had lost. They came down a wide ramp into a hall Sefa knew from the racks along its walls had been a muster hall, a barracks, a place where the Arvin garrison had armed and gathered. The racks still held spears, 200 years furred with rust, and the soldiers were still here, not slumped, not sitting, standing, in ranks. As if some last order to hold the line had reached them in the moment the city died and never been countermanded, and they had simply gone on holding it in the dark for 2 centuries, waiting for an enemy that had already won. There were a great many of them, more than Sefa wanted to count. This is what I meant, Call breathed beside her. Hale, this, it gets thicker every level. We are walking down into the thickest part of it. And this time Hale didn't argue. He just looked at the standing ranks of the dead for a long moment, and Sefa watched him do the thing that 6 years on still made her follow him. He read the room. There's a colonnade up the east side, Hale murmured. Behind the ranks, we don't cross the floor, we go along the wall, behind the pillars, single file, and we don't touch the ranks at all. They're facing the floor. They're still waiting for someone to come across the floor, so we don't. It was a good call. It was a better call than Sefa had been about to make. That was the trouble with Garen Hale, the thing that made him so hard to refuse. Half the time, the man was right. They went up the east colonnade in single file, behind the pillars, past the backs of the dead army. It nearly worked. They were most of the way along when one of Hale's people, a man named Edrin, near the front, carrying one of the haul sledges they had not yet had the sense to leave behind, caught the sledge's edge on a pillar, and it slipped, and to keep it from clattering down he grabbed for it, and his foot came down wrong, and he stumbled out from behind the pillars into the open floor. Into the thing the ranks were waiting for, a living thing on the floor in front of them. The nearest rank turned as one. Down the line, take them quiet, anybody runs. Hale's voice was low and fast and absolutely steady, and Sefa understood in that instant that whatever else he was, the man did not panic, and that was its own kind of leadership, the kind that held people in place when every instinct said flee. Then there was no more talking. There was only the work, faster than the opener, harder, the dead coming off the front rank in a turning wave, and the expedition meeting them along the colonnade in a tight, ugly press of close blades. Sefa put down two without a sound and reached for a third, and the third wasn't there. It had gone past her, around her, fast, one of the quick-minded ones, and it was behind Call, who was turned the wrong way finishing his own, and it had its dead hands going up for the old man's head. Called down, Sefa didn't think. She threw herself across the gap and got a fistful of the dead thing's rotted collar and hauled back with all her weight, and it came off Call and onto her, and she went down under it the way Call himself had gone down in the first haul, riding the fall, catching the body on her chest so it didn't strike the stone, and she got her blade up between them and into its skull, and held it as the looking went out and let it down soft, flat on her back with a 200-year-old soldier's weight on her ribs. Call's hand closed on her arm and pulled her out from under it before she'd even finished the breath. That's one I owe back, Call said into her ear, hauling her up. First haul I took one for you, now we're square. Keep count later, Sefa breathed and turned back to the line. It was Hale who closed it. Edrin, the man who'd stumbled, had gone down on the open floor with two of the dead on him, and he was going to die there, and Sefa was too far and Call was too far. And Hale crossed the floor he'd told them all not to cross, alone into the front of the turning ranks, and took both of the dead off Edrin with two hard, quiet strokes, and got the man by the back of his coat and threw him bodily back into the colonnade. And stood for one heartbeat alone in front of the whole dead army with his blade down at his side before he stepped back behind the pillars, unhurried, like a man who had simply gone to fetch a dropped tool. The ranks settled. The wave that hadn't been fully woken sank back toward waiting. Sefa's heart was slamming. They had held it, barely, quietly enough. Everybody up, Hale said, soft, counting heads with his eyes. Everybody up, good, that's the work. Nobody crosses the floor. He did not seem to notice that he just had. He looked back once at the standing dead, and for a moment Sefa saw something on his face that wasn't greed at all, something almost like respect, one captain looking at another's garrison, 200 years dead and still holding the line it had been given. Poor bastards, Hale said quietly. Still waiting for the order to stand down. Move. And Sefa moved with the rest, and hated how much she had just been reminded why she trusted him, an hour before she would have to stop. The floor took the choice out of everyone's hands an hour later. They were crossing what had been a grand gallery, a long hall with a vaulted roof, the kind of room an empire built to be admired in when the stone underfoot, 200 years rotted by the cistern's slow water, simply stopped being a floor. It went without warning and almost without sound, which was the only mercy in it. A long crack, a sigh of dust, and then the center of the gallery folded down into the dark below like a mouth opening, and the expedition that had been one line of people was suddenly two, with a gap of fallen floor and black air between them. Sefa had been near the back. When the floor went, she threw herself backward and got an arm around Nim and dragged her clear, and Brel hauled Call, and the four of them came up hard against the gallery's near wall with the new chasm in front of them. On the far side, beyond the gap lanterns, Hale, the other six, coughing in the dust but up, alive. Hale, Sefa called across, too loud. She knew it was too loud the instant it left her, the word going out into the dark of the buried city like a stone into a still pond. For a moment nobody breathed, they waited to hear the city wake. It didn't, not yet, but somewhere far off in the dark below the fallen floor something shifted, something heard. Calder, Hale's voice came back across the gap, low and hard now, the smile gone out of it. Can you cross? Sefa looked at the gap. 20 feet of fallen floor, black air, no way over that wouldn't take an hour, and a great deal of noise they could not afford. No, she called back, quiet as she could and still be heard. Not here, not quiet. Then listen, Hale's lantern moved. The treasury's east below us close. This gallery had a servant's run along the south wall your side. It'll drop you a level and bring you back under us. You take your 3 and you come up to the vault from below. We'll come down from here. We meet at the doors. Hale, you wanted to hold the expedition together, Hale said, and there was no cruelty in it, only the arithmetic. So hold your half, get them to the vault, Calder, I'll see you at the doors. His lantern turned away, the far side went dark. And Sefa Calder stood in the black with 3 people and 1 lantern and a chasm at her back, and understood with a cold drop in her stomach that for the first time in 6 years there was no chair to be second to. There was only her. Orders, Calder, Call said, not a challenge, a real question. He was looking at her differently now, they all were, Nim and Brel and Call, 3 faces turned to her in the lantern light waiting. Something happened in Sefa's chest then. Fear, yes, but under the fear something steadier. These 3 were hers now, not Hale's, hers. And the whole calculation in her head had changed shape so fast it frightened her. She was not thinking about the treasury anymore. She was thinking about getting Nim and Brel and Call back up into the daylight alive. South wall, Sefa said. We find the servants' run. We go slow, we go quiet, and we all 4 come out the other end. That's the order. Everybody comes out, say it back. Everybody comes out, Nim said. Everybody comes out, Brel said. Call looked at her a moment, and the disappointment from before was gone, replaced with something Sefa had not earned from him in 6 years of holding the line. Everybody comes out, Call said. After you, Captain. He had never called her that before. Nobody had. The word did something to her she didn't have time to feel. The servants' run was a low stone passage built for people carrying trays, and it was full of the dead. Sefa smelled them before the lantern found them, the dry, mineral smell of very old death, more dust than rot now. She put her hand back, palm out, stop. The 3 behind her froze. She edged the lantern's shutter, open a finger's width. The passage ahead was packed with them, not a handful, dozens, a whole household of the Arvin dead, the servants of this quarter, who had come down here when the city fell and simply stopped, standing where they'd stopped, sitting against the walls, slumped over the long-rotted things they'd been carrying, 200 years of them, shoulder to shoulder down a corridor barely wide enough for 2. And the only way to the vault ran straight through the middle of them. Sefa felt her heart go cold and steady. This was the thing she had warned Hale about. This was a room of them, and there was no going around. We can't fight that, Brel breathed, almost soundless, right at her ear. 40 of them in a hall that size, we wake one, we wake all of them, and they're between us and the only. We don't fight them, Sefa whispered. We walk through the room. She had said it to Nim once on Nim's first descent when the girl had frozen at her first wall of the standing dead. The dead don't want anything from you. They're just the room now. You don't fight the room, you cross it. Single file, my hand on the one in front, touch nothing else. If one wakes, you do not run, running wakes the rest. You put it down where it stands and you keep your nerve. Nim behind me. Brel, call last, you cover the back. She felt them line up in the dark. She felt 3 sets of hands settle, each on the shoulder of the one ahead, a chain of them breathing. Sefa shuttered the lantern down to a thread, took the first slow step into the standing dead, and they went through the room. It was the longest 100 feet of Sefa's life. She moved between the dead like water finding its way through stones. A shoulder here, a turn of the hips there. The dry husks of the Arvin servants stood close enough to touch on every side, faces a hand's breadth from her own, that not seeing looking pointed at nothing, and she breathed through her mouth and made herself slow, because fast was a sound and fear was a sound, and the only thing that was not a sound was a person moving like she belonged in the room. Behind her the chain followed. Nim, light as Sefa had taught her. Brel, huge Brel, folding his shoulders in, making himself small, trusting Sefa's path with his whole body. Call at the back, walking backward half the time, watching the dead they'd already passed. They were 2/3 through when Brel's scabbard kissed a dead man's hip. It was the smallest sound, a tap, leather on old armor. The dead man woke. Its head came up off its chest with a creak like a door, and the looking found Brel, and its mouth opened, and Sefa knew with absolute clarity that in the next half-second it was going to make the sound that woke the corridor, the sound that woke the city, the sound that killed all 4 of them. Nim killed it first. The girl came off the chain in a movement so fast and so quiet it was almost not there, one hand over the dead thing's open mouth, palm sealing it, the other driving her knife up through the soft place under the jaw, and she rode the body down to the floor with her hand still clamped over its mouth, killing the sound and the thing in the same motion, and she did not let go until it was still. The corridor held its breaths. One of the standing dead near them stirred, shifted, and went still again. Nothing woke. Sefa looked back. Nim was on the floor with a dead man's blood on her wrist and her chest heaving in absolute silence, and Brel had a hand pressed flat to her back, holding her, steadying her, the 2 of them frozen in the dark. Sefa met Nim's eyes and put 2 fingers to her own chest with me, and Nim nodded and got up, and the chain closed again and they kept going. Brel had saved Nim in the first hall. Nim had just saved them all in this one. That was how it worked down here when it worked, people reaching for each other in the dark. They came out the far end of the run into a small antechamber, and Sefa shuttered the lantern and put her back to the wall and let herself shake, once hard, where only her 3 could see. Everybody came out, Nim whispered, and there was something fierce and shining in it. Everybody came out, Sefa agreed. And she felt it then, the thing she had never felt in 6 years on Hale's rope, that these lives had come through because of a call she had made. Not a chair's call, hers. She had walked them through the worst room in the world and out the other side, and they were all still breathing, and the feeling that gave her was nothing like the feeling of holding the line for Garen Hale. It was the first time Sefa Calder understood what she was actually for. She did not have long to feel it. There was one more room between her and the vault, and the cistern had gotten there first. Beyond the antechamber, the floor simply went under water. This was the cistern's doing. The collapse that had opened this whole dead section had let the cistern in, and the water had found the lowest gallery and filled it, a long flooded hall of black still water between Sefa's people and the underside of the vault. The lantern light went out across it and did not find the far wall. It found, instead, the dead. They were in the water, some floated face down, turning slow, and some worse, much worse, stood, down on the flooded floor, water to their chests, to their chins, the drowned servants of this quarter, still upright, still waiting, with the black water lapping at their dead mouths. "We have to cross that," Brel said. It was not a question. His voice had gone very flat, the way the bravest people's voices go when they are afraid of exactly the right thing. "We have to cross that," Sefa agreed. She made herself think it through before she moved, because that was what the crossing needed, not nerve, thought. "Rope on," she said, soft. "All 4 waist to waist, arm's length. The water's a mercy and a trap both. It'll swallow the sound of us, but it'll hide what your feet find, and there are things standing on that floor. So, we go slow. We push the floaters aside, we don't climb over them. If something takes hold of you under the surface, a snag, a hand, anything, you do not thrash. Thrashing is noise, and noise wakes the hall, and thrashing is also how you drown. You stop. You tap the rope twice hard. And we get you, every time, say it." "Tap twice, don't thrash," Nim whispered. "Tap twice," said Brel. "You've done this before," Call said, tying on. It wasn't quite a question. "No," Sefa said honestly, but I know what kills people in water and it's panic every time, so we don't panic after me. She stepped down into the black water, and the cold closed on her like a fist, and she led her three out into the drowned hall. It was the cold that was hardest. The cold wanted you to gasp, and a gasp was a sound, so Sefa breathed slow through her teeth and felt the rope go taut and slack behind her as her people came down into it one by one. They waded, chest-deep, then deeper. She pushed the floating dead aside with the flat of her hand, gently, the way she'd move a curtain, and they turned away on the black water and drifted off into the dark. She felt the standing dead with her shins as she passed between them, a shoulder, a slack arm, the dome of a bowed head under the surface, and she made herself keep her pace even a woman walking through a room, and behind her she felt the rope stay calm, which meant her people were keeping their nerve, which meant she was keeping it for them. They were in the deepest part, water to their chins, when the rope behind Sefa snapped tight and stopped. She turned, Nim was gone. Where the girl had been there was only black water and a spreading ring, and the rope going down into it, taut, trembling, and then twice hard, a tap traveled up the line into Sefa's waist. Tap, tap. She didn't thrash. Even now, under the black water, drowning, the girl had not thrashed. She had done exactly what Sefa told her and tapped the rope and trusted them to be true. Brel, Sefa breathed one word, and it was enough, because Brel was already gone, the big man taking one breath and folding down into the black after the rope, into the water full of standing dead, after the girl who'd kept her nerve. Then there was nothing, the longest nothing of Sefa's life, longer than the servant's run, longer than her whole 6 years. Just the black water and the rope and Call's hand finding her shoulder in the dark, and the cold and the counting in her head that she could not stop, the seconds a person has under water before there are no more seconds. The water broke. Brel came up with Nim against his chest, the girl's arms locked around his neck, both of them dragging in air in great silent heaving pulls, and a dead thing came up with them, a standing one, its hand still fisted in the leg of Nim's trousers where it had caught her and pulled her down, riding up out of the water with its dead mouth opening to make the sound. Sefa put her blade through its eye before the sound could come, and held it, and let it sink back down into the black where it had waited 200 years for exactly one girl's ankle. Nim's eyes found Sefa's over Brel's shoulder. The girl was shaking, but she was breathing and she was quiet, and she gave one small fierce nod, the nod of someone who had stared straight down into it and not made a sound. Brel had saved her. Nim had saved them all in the run. Call and Sefa had traded one each in the muster hall. That was the tally, Sefa thought. That was the only tally that meant anything down here, not bars of gold, but this, the running count of who had reached into the dark for whom. They came up out of the water onto a broad stone stair at the far end, soaked and shuddering and alive, all four of them, and above the stair the lantern light was already glowing, and the great bronze doors of the treasury stood open, and Garin Hale was already there. The treasury of the Arvanes stood open. Hale's people had come down from above and forced the doors, great bronze things, green with age, and the lantern light spilled past them into a vault that had not held light in 200 years, and Sefa came up out of the antechamber and stopped and forgot, for one moment, everything she had just learned. Because it was real, all of it. The dream every relic hunter on the coast had died chasing, and it was real and it was right here. Gold, not coins in a chest, ingots, stacked like firewood wall to wall. Arvine silver gone black but silver still, in bars as long as a forearm. Chests of cut stones that threw the lantern light back in 100 colors. And along the far wall, the things that were worth more than all of it. The relics of a dead empire, the crowns and the seals and the ceremonial blades of a people who had held 100 years against the dead, and then vanished in a single one. 2 centuries of a civilization's whole accumulated weight, sitting in the dark, waiting for someone exactly foolish enough to come this deep. There she is, Hale said softly, and his voice had something in it Sefa had never heard, not greed exactly, something closer to grief, something closer to vindication. 200 years and not one of them came back to say it was here. We're the ones who came back. We're not back yet, Sefa said. Hale, listen to me. We take what we can carry quiet and we go, a pack each. Stones, not bars, stones are small and they don't ring. We can be rich and gone before. A pack each, Hale turned to look at her, and he wasn't smiling, and somehow that was worse than the pleasant. Calder, look at it, look at what's in this room. You want me to walk past 100 years of an empire's gold and take a pocketful of pebbles like a child at a beach? I want us to live, Sefa said. We're going to do both, Hale said. That's why I brought the line and the sledges. We load the bars, we rig the haul, we bring it up through the cistern shaft in one lift. I planned this, Calder. I have been planning this for a year. Nobody dies, we just have to be willing to carry it. And the others were already moving, Hale's 6, unrolling the haul lines, dragging the little folding sledges that carried down for exactly this, starting to load the Arvin gold bar by bar, and each bar made a small sound as it settled against the others, a small bright ringing sound, and Sefa stood in the doorway and counted the sounds and felt the whole buried city all around them begin very faintly to listen. It was not one sound that did it. That was the thing Sefa understood too late. It was the adding up of them. Bar on bar, the scrape of the sledges, the grunt of men taking weight, a chest of stones going over with a crash that Hale waved away. We're nearly loaded, move, each sounds small enough to forgive on its own, and all of them together a slow, rising tide of noise in a place that had been silent for 200 years, and the dead did not need much. The dead only needed enough. Sefa felt the city wake the way you feel a fever break, all at once, everywhere, a wrongness moving through the dark in every direction. From the corridor they'd come through, from the gallery above, from halls they had never seen and now never would. A sound began, not loud at first, just a stirring, a shifting, a dry chorus of 200-year-old joints remembering how to move, and it came from everywhere at once, and it was growing. That's the city, Call said. His voice was very calm, the calm of a man whose worst prediction has just come true. That's the whole city, Hale, you woke the whole city. Hale stood with an Arvin gold bar in his 2 hands, and for one moment Sefa saw him understand it. Saw the year of planning hit the wall of the thing he had not been willing to believe. Then he put the bar on the sledge anyway. Load faster, Hale said. We lift now. Move. The dead came into the lights. They came from the corridor first, the household they'd walked through, awake now and pouring into the antechamber, and then from the upper stair, and the lantern light filled with reaching arms and that terrible not-seeing looking, dozens of them, 100 more behind, the whole drowned weight of a dead empire converging on the one warm, bright, loud thing in 200 years of dark. The doors, Sefa was already moving, already shoving Nim back toward the bronze doors, already doing the only arithmetic that mattered. Fall back to the vault, the doors are bronze, we can hold the doorway, Brel the left, Call the right, Nim behind me. They formed the doorway, 4 of them, blades out, in the only gap the dead could come through, and the dead came through it, and the quiet game was over, and now it was just killing, fast and loud and endless because quiet didn't matter anymore. Quiet was 200 years ago. There was only the door and the 4 of them and the rising sea of the dead. Sefa killed until her arm was a separate screaming thing that belonged to someone else. Beside her Brel was a wall, taking them 3 at a time and throwing the bodies back into the press to foul the ones behind. Call fought with the terrible economy of an old man who knew exactly how much he had left and spent it one careful stroke at a time. Nim darted in the gaps, finishing what the others started, fast and silent even now out of pure habit. They were holding the door, for now, for another minute, maybe 2. And behind them, in the vault, Garen Hale was loading gold. Sefa heard it under the sounds of the dead. The scrape of the sledge, the ring of the bars. Hale and his 6 still loading, still rigging the haul, because Hale had decided a year ago what this was worth, and he was not going to stop now, not this close, not with the Empire's whole reserve an arm's length away. Hale, Sefa screamed it over her shoulder, past the door into the vault. Leave it and form on the stair. We go now, all of us, we go. The hall lifts in 2 minutes, Hale shouted back. Hold the door 2 more minutes, Calder, and we all go up. Rich, hold the door. 2 minutes, Sefa looked at the sea of the dead coming through her doorway, and she knew, the way she knew the weight of a blade, that they did not have 2 minutes. They had less than 1. The press was building. Brel was giving ground. The doorway was going to break, and when it broke for everyone, her 3 and Hale's 6 and Hale and all the gold in the grave. And here it was, the whole of it. Everything 6 years had been walking her toward, arriving in the space of a single breath. Hale had given an order, hold the door. The chair had spoken, and Sefa Calder had spent 6 years being the one who held the line when the chair spoke, who told the calls of the world to hold the line, who made loyalty mean follow. And she finally understood, with the dead a blade's length from her face, that she had been wrong about every word of it. Loyalty was not to the chair, it had never been to the chair. The chair would spend every life in this doorway for a sledge full of bars and call it the cost of the work. Loyalty was to the people reaching for each other in the dark. It always had been. She had just been too good a second to see it. So Sefa Calder disobeyed an order for the first time in her life. "Fall back," she roared loud, the loudest she had been in the buried city, loud as she pleased now because quiet was finished. "My three off the door now, the South Run Go. Hale's people, leave it and come, leave the gold and come, the door's breaking, run." Calder, hold the, Hale started. "It's breaking, Garen." Sefa was already shoving Nim into the south passage, already grabbing Call's collar, already screaming at Hale's six. "You can have the gold or you can have your life, you cannot carry both, choose." The door broke. It broke the way Sefa had known it would, all at once, Brel giving the last of the ground and the dead pouring through the gap into the vault itself. And in the chaos of it, some of Hale's six chose. 3 of them dropped the hall lines and ran for Sefa's voice in the south passage, choosing the life, and Sefa grabbed each one as they came and threw them past her into the dark, counting them, getting them through. And 3 of them did not choose. 3 of them stayed at the sledge because Hale was at the sledge, and Hale had the hall line in his hands and was screaming at them to lift, lift, the dead already among them, and the gold already going nowhere, and a year of planning drowning in 200 years of the dead. "Hale," Sefa screamed it one last time from the mouth of the passage, Cole's collar in one hand, the last of the choosers shoved through behind her. "Garran, leave it, come on." Garen Hale looked up at her across the breaking vault, over the heads of the dead, with the hall line of the Arvin Reserve gripped in both his fists. "We came back," he called to her, and there was no fear in it, only that terrible vindication, a man holding the thing he had given everything to hold. "We're the ones who came back, Calder. Don't you walk out of here empty-handed. Don't you dare." The dead closed over the sledge, and over the 3 at it, and over Garen Hale, and Sefa Calder turned away from the only thing he had ever taught her to want, and ran into the dark with her people, empty-handed and alive. They came up out of the cistern shaft into the grey light of the morning coast, an hour later, into rain, into the ordinary impossible world of the living, and lay in the mud at the top and breathed. 7 of them, Sefa counted twice, her 3 Nim, Brel, Call, and 4 of Hale's 6 who had chosen the passage when she called, 7 out of 11 that had gone down. 4 had stayed below, Hale and the 3 who would not leave the sledge. Sefa lay in the rain and let herself feel the weight of the 4. She did not look away from it. She had spent 6 years looking away from the cost while Hale did the arithmetic, and she was done with that, she found. If she was going to be the one who chose now, she was going to be the one who carried it too. 4 names. She made herself say all 4 out loud into the rain while her people listened. That was the price of the order she'd given. She would not pretend it was free. "You pulled 7 of us out of a waking city with nothing in our hands," Call said after a while. He was looking at the grey sky. "Most captains I've followed would have held that door till the last of us was meat for a sledge of bars." Hale wasn't wrong about everything, Sefa said, and she surprised herself by meaning it. "The gold was real, we did come back. He spent his whole life wanting to be the one who reached it, and he was. I'll carry that for him, that he was right that it was there." She closed her eyes. "He was just wrong about what it was worth. He thought it was worth us, it was never worth us." "You'd have told me to hold the line," Call said, "not cruel, just true. Yesterday, this morning, you'd have told me the chair knew best and to hold the line." "I know," Sefa said. "What changed?" Sefa thought about the servant's run, the chain of hands in the dark, Nim's palm over a dead man's mouth, Brel folding himself small to trust her path. The thing that passed between people who had just kept each other alive, that she had spent 6 years watching from the side of second to the chair, and that she had finally, an hour ago, in the worst place in the world, understood she was standing in the middle of. "I stopped being second to the wrong thing," she said. She got up out of the mud. Below them, 30 feet down and a world away, the buried city was full of waking dead and an empire's gold and a man who had chosen it, and it would all be quiet again in a day or a week, the dead settling back into their long waiting, the gold going back to sleep in the dark. Someone else would dream of it, someone else would come. They always came. Let them, Sefa Calder had been down there. She knew what the gold cost now to the ounce. She knew exactly what it was worth and exactly what it wasn't. Up, she told her people, hers, all 6 of them hers now, and that was a weight too, the good kind, the kind you chose to carry. We walk to Hythe. We tell the society their map stops at the Cistern Hall, and anyone who goes past it doesn't come back, and we drink for the 4 we left. Empty-handed, Brell said, not bitter, just naming it. Empty-handed, Sefa said, and found she could smile at it, the word Hale had thrown at her like a curse at the end. It's the richest I've ever come back, Brell, look, I've still got all of you. And the 7 of them turned their backs on the buried city and walked out across the morning coast in the rain, toward Hythe, toward the living, carrying nothing at all. It was the most Sefa Calder had ever carried out of that dark. She knew that now. She thought she'd known it the moment she let go of the door.